So good evening and welcome to our first discussion on a blueprint of enlightenment, a contemporary commentary on Dōgen Zenji's Gakudō Yōjinshū by Gien, Inoue Roshi. So tonight we're talking just about the introduction, which was written by his son, Inoue Kondo Roshi. Several of us here met Kondo Roshi, Miki, and I, both who are here, both met Kondo Roshi when we were taking a trip to Japan on a tour of Ryokan-san's, on a pilgrimage of Ryokan-san's sites, and we stopped by his temple. And he also came to Entsuji while we were there and gave a talk on the Shobogenzo. So he has written the introduction then to his father's and his Zen master's book, commentary. And so that's what we'll talk about tonight, just these pages. So he tells us right away that the important thing is that Buddha was not a Buddhist, that he was not somebody who studied Buddhism. And so that's important as he goes through his introduction and points out about the development of ideology in the various world religions and how disheartened he is to see that happen. So then he goes straight into enlightenment. I mean, very strong statement. Enlightenment is the only way to verify awakening to the true nature of the self without the least bit of deviation. So, you know, I could go on and reiterate, but I wonder if you have any opening thoughts about these first couple of paragraphs on this page 21. And do we know the difference between a religion and an ideology?
Well, when I was teaching the Introduction to Religion class at the University of Hawaii, I always started the first night of my course by asking the class, what's the definition of a religion? And they would always talk about ideologies and beliefs, statements of belief, either of the tradition they'd been trained in or just very generally. And I let that discussion go for a while. And then I would say, but religion is something you do. And within that, enlightenment is the experience that comes out of what you do.
And of course, is something that you live.
Yeah, yes, that's a beginning of what I think he's saying here.
Right. Yeah, when I taught world religions at South Puget Sound, of course, I studied what the state of Washington says a religion is. To be a religion, you are a body of people who meet, who have public, you are open to the public, and you have rituals and a set of beliefs if you choose. And that's about it. And pretty much you are a religion if you call yourself a religion. So one of the exercises that I gave my students was to create a religion. In small groups, I asked them to create religions, and they came up with multiple religions. It was not hard for them to do. So they could be declaring in the state of Washington that they are religions, provided that they have public meetings of some kind or other with rituals during those meetings. So in Washington, it's easy to be called a religion. It's easy to declare yourself a religion. And it may come out of an ideology also. Anybody want to say what an ideology is? Bob, what's an ideology?
Well, I think the meaning is in the word itself. It has to do with a structured set of ideas, and at least that's how I think about it. So you would have Marxist ideology or capitalist, or go on down the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like what Nikki said about religion being an activity.
Right.
And I once tried to research what the actual word meant, and I think it has something to do with binding together. It's from the Latin, to bind together in some way.
Right. To, around some kind of sacred idea, was sacred element. But then would you say about an ideology, is it also that the beliefs are to the exclusion, that you are right, and to the exclusion of any other beliefs then? Is that implied in the word ideology? Yeah, Karen?
I was going to say that it seems like it makes things smaller instead of making them bigger. That it's less inclusive and it divides. Ideology divides.
Yeah. Okay.
When I think of ideology, as Bob said, literally, ideas, ideals that often connote into a certain social order, that it should create almost a blueprint for a political, economic, social construction.
Okay.
And this might be overstating it, but I think religion in our country connotes some type of like a superhuman power, controlling power, with a god, a deity that is frequently invoked as a personal god. And so when I read a couple of sentences, religion, ideology, it got me to thinking, well, what is my faith? What is Buddhism? Is it a religion? It certainly isn't an ideology. And I don't think it's a religion. Although I think I read somewhere that Buddhism is religion before there was religion. But that strict interpretation of religion with a superhuman controlling power, personal God, I don't think is Buddhist, which is about enlightenment for oneself, through oneself. It's an internal process. It's an internal activity. It's not about an external God, an external deity.
But we do all the things that would look like a religion. We hold ceremonies, we chant, we honor the Buddha. So we do all of those things that you would say are in the quote unquote religion camp.
Agreed.
So we do that.
Yeah.
But perhaps we could say that religion is a very deep, sacred internal matter that we live and we unfold as we live out the traditions that have been given to us throughout the history from the time of the Buddha.
Oh.
We certainly reenact traditions.
Yes.
And we make them new as we practice them and live them.
Yes, our practice certainly is, I think, one of ritual, of faith, and to some extent, worship. For example, adherence just to the six paramitas, holding them sacrosanct as guiding principles in our life.
Okay. All right.
Worshipping the ancestors who developed these words of wisdom.
Yep.
In a limited sort of way.
So he just continues in that paragraph about religion and ideology, and that he's critical, as Dogen Zenji has also been very critical of those who, as Kondo Roshi says, hoist up their doctrine and end by fighting each other. So this is truly a sad and pitiful situation, he says. And we certainly see that with religious strife around the world, and certainly the attempt to involve us all in one ideology or another. More religious wars than any other, I think, in the history of the world. So then he tells us Zen Buddhism is not an ideology or a way of thinking even. True religion has no color, form, and so he goes into that. So this is the true nature right now of each one of us. So he's speaking that it is not an ideology or way of thinking, but it is what we truly are. Already what we are. Our true nature is the Dharma itself. So if it were separate, he says, down to the bottom of the page, we would be able to understand it by looking at it, but it's something that we inherently feel within us. And there is no division. It is so deep in us, it's what we are. As Dogen Zenji said, we are the Dharma, we are Buddha nature. It's not that there is Buddha nature, but that we are that. We are Buddha nature. But Kondo Roshi then, points out that we can see ourselves. We can see ourselves because we take form, but we can't point to or hold Buddha nature as a something of any kind. We can't see it, and there is no trace of that, of any kind of that, except the traces of our actions, the traces of our practice together. But otherwise, there is no trace that can be found of what we might call the Dharma. And no division between us and the Dharma. So I'm turning the page over to page 22. And please, anybody, interrupt at any time, ask any question. And I hope more that we have some dialogue. And this is difficult material to have dialogue around because it is so ephemeral. As Roshi says, there is no trace of it. So how do we talk about it? How do we even discuss it? It's not a simple thing at all. So, Allison, I think you had a question about that comes up on this page, do you not? Right there in the paragraph.
Well, starting with it's actually the first 3 paragraphs, but this realizing it directly through our own body and mind. And how when sitting zazen, this is what we're doing. And as you go down into the second paragraph, I'm trying to think of a simple way to say this, but I'm going to read part of it. A little bit below the halfway mark of the second paragraph. Once again, the only activity right now happens at the place where this body-mind is. There is no distance to now or here. This way of being is not what we attain by asking, by seeking, or by accumulating merit. It is also not something that becomes clear after putting in order what has happened up until now, or by letting go of it. And then a sentence in the next paragraph. Zen, the Buddha way, and the Buddha Dharma cannot be any place other than where each person is active right now. And so that really struck me. And I was trying to figure out why. It's like, occupy here. For me, and I think so often, I've identified my body mind as self, and it's not. There's a location where this body mind is, and this is where the activity of the Buddha Dharma is for everyone, for each person. And that was just stunning to me, that it's not out there somewhere. It's not this. It's true that the body mind is empty, but it's also located right here, and this is where the Buddha Dharma is. And so that was, I don't know if anybody has another interpretation of that or another way to look at it.
Well, Kanto Roshi, when he would come to Ensuji Temple, knew that people become very attached to that kind of phenomenal teacher. Every time he would say, "I'm going back to my own temple now," and he says, "So don't, I'm not there, I'm not here anymore with you. I'm gone. Be where you are. Practice where you are. Buddha nature is what you are doing. It's where you are. So when I leave, our relationship ends." And not that we wouldn't remember one another or think of one another, but he was saying, don't emotionally attach, because your attachment, your essential emotional attachment, is within to the practice, to where you are.
Yeah.
Where you are, the place is. Like we were saying on Saturday during the one-day sesshin, that Zen Master Baoche of Mount Mayu was fanning himself. "Why do you keep fanning himself?" the monk asked. He says, forget how he says it exactly, but then he just keeps fanning himself, because here is where the wind of the Dharma is, that he must do it himself. He must make it alive and active wherever he is. So even though the winds of the Dharma are everywhere, we still, as Roshi says, right where we are cannot be any place other than where each person is active right now.
As Dōgen says, here is the place, here the way unfolds.
Right, that's right. That's also in the Genjo koan. So it's not any place other than where we are. So if we are, we're dreaming it out there. We're imagining something.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You know what I liked about that section, Allison, that you pulled out was that last sentence in the second line, or in the second paragraph. "It is also not something that becomes clear after putting in order what has happened up until now or letting go of it." Because I think that certainly popularly, I think a lot of people in the West frame Buddhism as a way to get your head together. And that to me is a reminder that it's not about that. And it's I mean, it could be an outcome, but you don't have to get it all in order.
Yeah, you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to, yeah.
There is nothing to figure out, essentially.
You don't have to get your life story together. So this is how I got to here. I have to get it all, in order. I mean, it's just it's already done. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to do.
This makes me think that Zen is not religion in the sense that...
Bill, is that you? Excuse me, Bill, is that you speaking, Bill?
It is. I'm sorry. I have my video off.
Okay, yeah, there you are. Okay,
There I am.
yeah.
It makes me think that that Zen is really not a religion in that common Western understanding of, oh, there's that religion, there's that group of people who follow that way. Zen and Zen is a universal. You can follow any particular like religious tradition, and still be subject to the truth as the truth of the Dharma as we understand it in Zen. Does that make sense?
So are you saying you could practice another religion and still
And still be subject to the truth of the Dharma, which is that, of course, in this body mind, the Dharma is manifest, whether I'm a Muslim or a Christian or.
yeah, I think that is so. You know, and I have had endless arguments with Jerry Halpern here about something like that, about the universality of it, about whether my saying that everybody belongs to the religion because it is universal. And my argument was, supposing I don't want to belong to your religion or your Dharma, what does that mean then for me? Am I able to do that? I mean, if you take the position, say in Christianity, well, Christianity is ubiquitous, it's for everybody, but I don't want to be named a Christian. Am I therefore part of that universal belief? Or am I able to be absent from that belief? So I have argued about that particular viewpoint. And I'm still there in that argument with Jerry about that, about the universality of taking the universal view that therefore everyone else is subject to the Dharma in that sense, even though the Dharma is the total viewpoint for this person.
And I have the view that anyone can wake up, anyone can experience enlightenment.
Yes.
In any tradition. But I do think, and I'm pretty sure, just in my own experience, that the experience of enlightenment, the experience of awakening, is going to be colored by that religion, and it's going to have a certain difference in the experience. It doesn't make it any. I think it can't help but have a slightly different way of feeling about it, or a way of experiencing it. And that doesn't make it any less or more. It's just that each religion, there's a certain, I don't even know what you call it. When you practice a certain religion, you kind of become it. And it becomes a part of you. And so that when you do have, say, awakening experience or achieve union with God, or however you want to put it, you're going to feel it differently. And I really think that. And I think that I think it's really good to respect that and understand that with people. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's I think what I want to say is that I don't want to imply my universal view onto others and wish to allow them their universal view.
Mm-hmm.
So that I don't say that that Muslim is also the Dharma, is the Dharma. And yet there's a kind of a space that I make that allows the Muslim to be completely Muslim at the same level of awakening. You know, at some kind of course awakening, or total revealed sacred nature. So it's this is just a nuanced view that I have had, because when we first began Haiku Zendo, that was the bylaw, that we were universal and everybody belonged. And I said, supposing I don't want to belong. So it was just an interesting nuance, and perhaps I'm just not fully awakened to be able to accept that. But it's just not what I could say, simply because I feel like I must allow everyone their universality also. And that may not make sense, but that's sort of how I feel. And as Allison says, from their viewpoint of how they see the universe within their tradition. So to me, it's a delicate matter, that, and so there is the danger of becoming ideological if we try to include everyone in our view. But
Wow.
I mean, there are so many pathways.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. It's very, very delicate, very subtle. The way I'm thinking of it as I'm hearing it discussed is that kind of the difference between Buddhism and, say, a theological religion is that, being raised Roman Catholic, I can speak to Christianity. As a Christian, I need to adopt Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. As a Buddhist, I don't need to necessarily adopt anything supernatural so much as understand more about realizing each person's full potential. And I think it's interesting also in that our philosophy, our worldview, our religion is excuse me, what's called karma and what's basically, I think, causality. And so I don't know if people can exclude themselves from causality. I think it's interesting that Buddhism takes some very fundamental, say, tenets of physics or something like that. As its belief, it's like, just bedrock, ground-based stuff, and that's one of the things I love about it. So I don't know if we can exclude people from causality, but maybe they have a different view of causality. I don't know. So I think those are some thoughts I had about it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Edo-san?
In the
Go ahead, whoever.
Go ahead, Amir.
go
Who's talking? Who's talking now?
This is Amir. Is my microphone working okay?
It's a little bit
Very soft.
I can hear you, yes, softly.
Okay. In the example that you call on, and the monk and the fan, and that discussion, where the one monk says they
Who is talking? Is it you, Amir?
Amir, you
He's
froze up.
frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He froze up.
Okay, are you back, Amir?
did I freeze?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm having some technical difficulty. Maybe I'm going to do some troubleshooting, and I'll get back.
Okay. All right. We'll have the thought about the fan question.
Edo-san?
Yeah.
I know we've talked in the past. I'm trying to reconcile what we're talking about these ideas of ideology versus religion, is Buddha this or that, Buddhism this or that. And yet, it occurred to me there's been a lot of effort put into establishing criteria or guidelines for priest training, for, I mean, a whole series, in essence, creating a process for getting from point A to B and distinguishing what Soto Zen is, as opposed to the person on the street who one day wakes up and says, oh, I'm going to start a Zen temple. I read a book. And so I'm trying to reconcile that with what we're talking about now, with my sense is Buddhism is an activity. We could say Zazen is that activity, and leave it at that.
So the priest training is a skills-based situation in which a person needs certain skills to be able to do the ceremonies or to be able to administrate a temple or something like that. So that's a skills-based thing, which has nothing to do with whether you understand whether you are awakened or not.
Okay.
Nothing, whatever.
Yeah. I was just trying. All of a sudden, I thought, okay, aren't we creating a box of some?
No. It's competence in skills-based activities that allow you to have to run a temple smoothly.
Okay.
To be able to help people. That's a skills-based matter, and that's not. I mean, awakening has nothing to do with skills-based anything. Okay. So yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was confused.
Yeah.
And I think that each religion has different forms, different ritual, different forms. And that's part of that religion. That's part of being in the relative world. That's part of having a body mind. So, that's what we would call the relative and the absolute. So,
which leads to that next paragraph on that same page, when Roshi says that Zen practice is nothing other than studying the body mind of the big self. Zen, the Buddha way, and the Buddha Dharma cannot be any place, which is the sentence right before, cannot be any place other than where each person is active right now. So it is Zen practice is nothing other than studying the body mind of the awakened self, the big self. I'm going to imply the awakened self there. So that is essentially what we do in sitting Zazen in our practice. We are the big self as we study, as we sit. But it is most interesting that Kando Roshi says that we don't study the Dharma and we don't study Dōgen. We do Dōgen. We do the practice. We don't study it. So it's interesting that he says studying the body, mind, and the big self. We do the big mind and the big self, I'm going to say over him because that's what I heard him say in person. So, it's what we do. And that then is our deep religious, intuitive nature coming out in the expression of practice. Because all of the aspects of practice are awakening itself. They are the expression of awakening. So let's move down a little bit then along this page. And anything else then in this next paragraph? We just learned that Dōgen wrote the Gakudō Yōjinshū after he came back. He wrote it in, he came back to Japan in 1227. He was 27 years old when he comes back with this treasure that he is holding, that he has experienced in China. And he comes back and he writes this several years after he is there. And this was written then in 1234. when he realized that he had not laid down the blueprint for enlightenment. He had shown us how to sit zazen with the posture, but he hadn't shown us, had not yet written how to, what this blueprint was, this blueprint of awakening. But he did write the Bendowa, that's the wholehearted practice of the way, which is usually the first chapter in Shobogenzo. And he says, now it's the top of 23. The manner and principles of the Zazen you practice should be based on the Fukan Zazengi, which I compiled during the preceding period in 1227. And then he goes on further to say that he needed to, the task of refining the text in the interests of transmitting the true Dharma. So this is Dogen's intent in everything he writes, is that he would transmit the true Dharma, and that if we didn't get it one way, he would show us another. We could look at another aspect and then say, oh yes, or look at another way and another person would see it in a different facet. Always, always a different facet. So,
so in that paragraph, am I to understand that he wrote the Fukan Zazengi in 1227,
mm-hmm.
and then it got cleaned up into something that then shows up as being dated 1237?
Yes, he refined it, and a clean copy of a revised version of Fukan Zazengi then was written at Tempuku period and dated 1237. And then there's a popular version that comes later. So he's always been working and refining these particular documents.
Mm.
So we come down further then, and then when we get to the bottom of the page, Kanda Roshi is going to show us, the 10 themes that are in the guidelines of what we are going to study. We're going to take these one at a time. And the first one is simply forget the self and quietly practice the way. And this is truly the Bodhi mind, which is so difficult for us to believe that this mind that is just full of clutter and annoyance and gets tossed around by one thing and another, that is actually the Bodhi mind. How do we get there to that sureness and that confident that is the Bodhi mind? Just forget yourself and quietly practice the way. Truly the Bodhi mind. And then the second one, the need for training upon encountering the true law. And then, so we come into practice and something touches us and we feel as if we have come home. And then we say, oh, I need to train in this. I need to feel the confidence of practice and be able to train in it, just so I know how to move around the zendo, so I know how to conduct myself in the ceremonies and so forth. And so this is the training, but not only that kind of training, but also the training of the mind in sitting zazen, how we train ourselves to focus and sit still in the midst of practice. And then to one realizes enlightenment is a result of training, and that because we have been training ourselves, training the mind body, that enlightenment is a natural result. The realization of it's a natural result of that. And then 4, do not practice Buddhism for your own benefit, for fame and profit, or for rewards and miraculous powers. So you can imagine how few people actually come to Zen practice because we want something we want some benefit. I want to know that I'll feel better, or that I'll lower my blood pressure, or something like that, or that I'd like to be famous, a famous Zen master, or something like that, or that this will be a way for me to go around the country and earn a living because I can give Dharma talks and make money. And maybe I can attain some miraculous powers to be able to read minds and to do exotic kinds of things. And so we may not practice for any of those causes, for any of those reasons. We might try them, but we'd come to great disaster.
Anne?
Yes.
In particular, I look forward to this section and learning to distinguish between personal enlightenment not being for my own benefit.
Yes, this is very difficult. This is difficult because, for instance, just having been a mother of 3 teenagers when I was practicing, I would often sit just so that I could be a peaceable parent, which was for my own benefit, and just so that I could withstand the turmoil of being a single parent with 3 kids who were wonderful, but they're teenagers, and so and I was really sitting for my own benefit for a long time. I think it's also a natural inclination, but
Don't you think it was for your benefit, but it wasn't just for your benefit?
well, no, the kids benefited actually. And I told you already that they would say, "Oh, good, Mom's going to a weekend session. She'll be nice on Monday."
That's so great.
But anyway, there are all kinds of benefits that we hope that we will get. Maybe the benefit of calming our mind, or letting go of our own anger. But all of those are benefits to other people too. So, as you say, Karen, it's not our own benefit. So, and then 5, the truth or falsity of enlightenment depends upon whether or not one has a true master. So we will look at that. Gien Roshi is very adamant, and so is Kanto Roshi, adamant about training with a true master, somebody who has awakened and is not spewing false kinds of teachings, especially around those kinds of things of, I could say to you, I think let's all sit zazen because we're going to feel so much better later. And, let's sit so that we can do such and such a thing. Or let's all sit together and we'll become a well-known temple. And there are teachers who might fall into those kinds of teachings. And we should certainly beware of falling in with a teacher who might have those kinds of directions. So they're both very, very adamant about that. And Dōgen is also. And then 6, Buddhist trainees should realize that Buddhism is beyond either thought, discrimination, and imagination, or insight, perception, and intellectual understanding. So remember Harada Roshi that we just finished studying. You can remember some of our discussions about this, especially where he's talking about perception, that Zazen is prior to perception. And it's prior to any of these. It's prior to thought, prior to any discrimination, prior to imagination or insight or intellectual understanding. So this is something that we can realize and almost take solace in, that we aren't led astray by the imagination or fall into discrimination, painful kinds of discrimination. Number 7, the many teachers who went to study Buddhism in China in the past clung to the net of scholastic Buddhism. Although they transmitted various Buddhist texts, they seem to have forgotten the spirit of Buddhism. So we could have we could say something about our American Zen and the falling into psychological texts too much, so that we forget the depth of the teaching, which is beyond any of those thoughts of, beyond thought discrimination and imagination, beyond psychology. Not that we shouldn't have a healthy psychology, we should, but. Okay, number 8. It is impossible to realize what the law is by groping or searching for it. Those who have seen the way forget their knowledge of it, transcending relative consciousness. So that's something that is very difficult to think about or realize, that if we have a great awakening experience, that we are in an altered mind, or we move in, I call it natural mind. I've said that again and again, but it is not the relative consciousness. Those who have seen the way forget their knowledge of it. It's not something we grope or search for. And number 9, those who practice the way should first of all believe in it. Those who believe in the way should believe that they have been in the way from the very beginning, subject to neither delusion, elusive thoughts, and confused ideas, nor increase, decrease, and mistaken understanding. We will hear Gien Roshi's thoughts on this. From the very beginning, we have always been on this path. And neither delusion, elusive thoughts, or confused ideas, neither increase, decrease, and mistaken understanding, that we are in a sense, we are not subject to those. Those who believe in the way should believe that they have been in the way from the very beginning, subject to neither delusion, elusive thoughts, and confused ideas, nor decrease, increase, and mistaken understanding. Some of this is difficult grammar to parse out. But the point is here that we keep confidence in saying, in a commitment to the way. Something intuitive tells us that we have come to the end road. This is the end practice. We've maybe looked every place else, we haven't found the answer. And we come to this and we say, there's something here I know, and I feel confident in it, and I believe that I can resolve my deep existential questions by this practice, by going this way, committing to this way.
Is that where faith comes in, Ado? Doubt, faith, and determination.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And not an easy one to come to. And yet there's something that we have to say to ourselves. If I have been suffering so much and I come to this practice, I've come to this point, and I'm going to trust it, we have to take that leap then, that leap of faith, that this is going to answer the question for us. And it's that kind of resolve, that kind of committed resolve, that truly opens us to be able to allow awakening. There is an allowing that takes place, that we're going to open. And I think of Koben Roshi would speak of this as opening. He would say, "Are you opened yet?" He wouldn't say, "Are you, did you get enlightenment?" Are you open? Have you opened? Like the blossom that is completely opened up and shows the totality of its whole inner nature. So
I have a question about that, because the way that you're speaking about it in terms of committing to it because we're seeking, to answer these existential questions. How is that not practicing for your own benefit? Or does that drive, or does that practicing for your own benefit, is that just a delusion? Does it just fall away, or?
It's a complete delusion that we are alone, that we are separate, or that we have no effect in the world. That's a delusion, because everything we do has an effect on everything and everyone around us. So if we resolve our own deep questions, we are something better in the world for the sake of others. So this is, I mean, we might not think that it is for others that we are doing it, but it actually is. When we realize, when we open, we realize that. So it has always been for the benefit of others.
Thank you.
The place that it speaks to me, this ninth, has to do with something that comes up later in this chapter. On page 30, at the top of and I'll return here without dwelling on page 30 much. But on page 30, she speaks.
Oh, we're not going there yet.
Okay, but then I won't say what I won't take up his, I'll speak of just for myself.
Okay, well, actually, that's Dōgen Zenji on page 30.
Well, at the top, on page 30, he says, the illusion of he had the illness of seeing his enlightenment. Mm-hmm. That's the second paragraph. And then at the end of the page, he discusses that some more. But there's a problem, because if you have some sense of calmness, or have ever had this, you'll remember it. Mm-hmm. And by remembering it, you're separated from it. But there's no doubt at all that you've had some authentic something which you remember and think about. But in thinking about it, you make a great mistake, which you may keep on doing for 30 years, in that you can try to see yourself separated from yourself, or try to see your enlightenment. And how do you stop that? Because first of all, you know that there's an authentic experience that you've been associated with that's important. On the other hand, it turns out no matter how hard you try, if you try to remember it or recreate it or aim toward it, then you're doing it for yourself and for some reason. And it's like trying to see your eyes with your own eyes. You cannot do it. So the resolution, or so it seems to me, lies here in this ninth discussion, because if you have faith, you can give up trying to get anything, thinking that the effort that you're making will have any result. So you can give up, you can, on the basis of faith, give up making that effort and just sit.
Okay, that's good. That's good. But I want to also say that somewhere or other, Allison and I, if we can remember where Dōgen says that, you have to remember that that experience occurred. On the one hand, you must, but the way, to me, the way in which you remember it is the key thing. If you are remembering it because you want to recreate it, you're in trouble. There's no doubt about that. But if you remember it, and you must remember it because it was the awakening that opened you to be able to serve the world, you must remember that. So to me, it's the way that you remember that is important here. Pardon?
I certainly don't say you shouldn't. It should cease to exist in your understanding.
Right. But of course, if you remember it because of spiritual greed, of course that's the wrong thing. or you may hunger for the joy of that experience or something like that, then of course it's a problem. And it will haunt you in a bad way and not in the right way. So to be able to understand that it must be remembered because you carry the transmission of awakening. You carry that. And so you must be able to hold it. If you totally forget it, then that's not right either. So there's this balanced walking to be able to hold the responsibility of awakening.
But should you remember it while you're sitting?
Well, you might, but you're not going to hold on to it for the whole sitting.
Well, you might.
And I don't think you
I
have-
certainly did for a very long time.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
because you're trying to reach it again.
And I think that's the
I
mistake,
see.
is trying to recreate it or trying to reach it again, because that's what creates the separation, and that is a kind of sickness.
And so there's a question of how do you give that up? How do you see that something you know that's true
Well,
is causing a problem for you and needs to be given up?
Okay, Allison, go ahead.
On the basis of knowing that you're already okay, and that when you take this position you already have it, then you can relax.
mhm.
Although keeping a very strict attention.
Right. I think our brains work in such a way that we're not going to forget it. But to try to remember it, to make an effort to remember it, that almost implies that you're trying to recreate it. We don't need to make an effort to remember it. It'll never leave us. I mean, our brains are such that it's something that can't be forgotten, I think. If you ignore it, I think I think it's a point of faith and confidence. And it's not trying to recreate it.
Yeah.
It's the closest I can come.
So I think also there's a point of self-patience that, so one has had some extraordinary moment. And so if one is sitting zazen with trying to get that back again, patience, it's like training our own child.
Yeah.
And just allowing the child to work out. Okay, well, you want that? Fine. See how that goes. And, like sitting with any aspect that we have experienced, we may sit with anger for years and years and years and years. And eventually we work that out. So I think it is like anything like that. Eventually it dissipates and we stop doing it. And it might take that long. And it depends on how strong the mind is. I mean, if someone has a really, really strong attachment, a strong mind to it, it'll tag for a long time, no doubt about it. But we do that with other aspects of ourselves too. I mean, it could be anger or any particular emotion that plagues us could go on for years and years and years. And we do work it out. So patience, be the parent of ourselves. Be the good parent of the child that has awakened. So anyway, that's how I see it. But
Are we going to discuss his biography next week, or
we weren't going to? No,
we weren't. Okay.
Yeah, we've just
because that was
yeah.
All right.
We were just going to read it. We can talk about. Just let me get to 10, and we can take a few moments to talk about the biography if you would like. Then, but anyway, the number 10. There are two ways to realize enlightenment. One is to train under a true Zen master, listening to his teachings. The other is to do Zazen single-mindedly. There is no need to change our existing body and mind. For the direct realization of the way simply means to become enlightened through training under a true Zen master. So that's number 10. And so he goes on to talk about, even Dōgen Zenji. I mean, I find this very troubling. If you aren't able to find a true master, it is best not to study the Buddha Dharma at all. Dōgen Zenji said that. And I remember Aitken Roshi talking about, of course, Aitken Roshi was a deeply realized teacher, but he also said that the teacher you need is somebody who keeps the precepts. that constitutes a really good teacher, someone who keeps the precepts. So I think about Aitken Roshi in relationship to that Dōgen Zenji said that. So then we learn about how Gien Roshi would greet people and how's it going, and he had 3 things: don't seek, don't ask, don't interfere. And those are 3 the 3 things we have posted in our living room are Suzuki Roshi's. Don't worry, don't ask, don't explain. Something like that. Is that what it is that's over there?
Yeah, don't worry, don't grumble, don't explain. Something
Don't
like
grumble.
that.
Yeah, don't worry, don't grumble, don't explain. So here we have don't seek, don't ask, don't interfere. So to get back to you, Jerry, to sit in a very difficult way, trying to get back to that would be an interference. That's interfering with the awakening. So that might be an easy way to see it too. So.
Gato Roshi, when Jerry had asked this question, I knew that I had read the answer somewhere, but I just hadn't heard the question. But what I was thinking about was a very short paragraph in the Lankavatara Sutra that reads, having attained this is exalted and blissful state of realization as far as it can be attained by disciples, the bodhisattva must not give himself up to the enjoyment of its bliss, for that would mean cessation, but should think compassionately of other beings and keep ever fresh his original vows. He should never let himself rest nor exert himself in the bliss of the samadhis. So anyway, that occurred to me, and I went and pulled up the passage when I heard the question.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Very good advice. Good advice. Good counsel. Good counsel for practice. Yeah. So we finish off this paragraph. Then he finishes by reminding us that it's at the bottom of 25, reminding us that religion is not an ideology or system of thought. Liberation is in the world of real things. Suffering becomes a problem when people deal with things that they pick up as thoughts, assuming that they can resolve their problems by making use of those thoughts. So I think Allison was talking about that, or we started out early on that kind of notion that we think, and therefore we think some more, and we think that thinking will eventually get us to the end of that thinking, but it just creates more problems. But I also want to emphasize that I still like Ken Wilber's 3 important points when he says, wake up, grow up, and
Clean up.
So we have to grow up properly. We have to mature appropriately. We have to take care of the psychological self. That has to grow up. And we have to wake up then, which is what we are talking about. And then we have to clean up we have to do the homework of anything that we have not taken care of yet. And that means to really clean up any trailing stuff that we have left behind so that we don't reenact any of the creation of suffering that we might have done in the past. So I really like those 3 points, so that we do not do spiritual bypass when we are talking about waking up, that we don't bypass ourselves psychologically, our own psychological growth, or our own emotional maturing and ability to hold relationships and to live in the way that the Buddha helps us to be able to do. So I just want to say that, because certainly this can be a methodology to bypass all of our problems, and it's not intended to do that at all. But it comes at a pretty good time, I think, in our chaotic stuff that we started out with tonight, knowing that we are in difficult times in our nation. And so it behooves us to be able to see clearly and to so forth. Brian, so what do you want to say about the biography?
Well, I mean, I had also underlined that same passage about the illness of seeing his enlightenment.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that that we had a chance to thoroughly explore that. But Amir, I really appreciate what you shared from that sutra. That was really helpful.
So where can people locate that, Amir?
Brian.
You're muted.
So it's in the Lankavatara Sutra.
Chapter 8, the attainment of self-realization.
Okay, in the Lankavatara Sutra.
How do you spell that sutra?
Lankavatara. I will, just one second, I'll find the cover and I'll share it.
Lanka.
Like Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lanka, Vatara. Lankavatara Sutra. And it's chapter 8. And you get that online. Yeah. Lankavatara Sutra, chapter 8.
Yeah, and then Jerry had also mentioned this, but further down on page 30, it talks about how he, in an instant, was cured of the illness of looking at enlightenment, and that rephrasing of the illness of seeing his enlightenment, but then flipping it around to say the illness of looking at enlightenment, kind of, I guess, crystallized it for me a little bit based on the discussion that we had around that it's like the looking at enlightenment is kind of a different way of understanding that, because looking is like examining, trying to understand, really trying to puzzle it out, like really like you're attached to it, whereas seeing gives more of that impression of like just experiencing, remembering, being aware of that. So
yeah, so you will recall that Harada Roshi and Inoue Kondo Roshi both are very much about the eyes as a way of getting us past the notion of that is pre-perception. And that when we understand seeing is seeing, and there's nothing else, there's just seeing, that is pre-perception. So we talked about that earlier, and Harada Roshi deals with that. So my guess would be that when Gien Roshi says such a thing, that is what's intended there, that it's a pre-perception kind of seeing, such that we don't have to engage in some kind of examination to explain it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I just found that to be very confusing, because that the illness of seeing his enlightenment too is footnoted, and the footnote says, seeing his enlightenment, a condition in which the person has seen the oneness of all things, but is still aware of that experience, thereby creating a separation from it.
Right. Yep.
I think it's the dualism there of seeing something instead of being the seeing.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Well, so sort of something, you know, what could we use as, you know, at least some kind of something like being in love or something.
Right.
You know, the experience of falling in love with somebody, and then, you know, beginning to analyze it. And there's nothing at all to do with it. When we start analyzing it, that's just not it at all.
Mhm.
And so it may be something like that we could imagine a little bit how it would be. So, yeah. Okay, so so what I recommend is you might read through the whole thing, or you might not. And I think it's okay to read that is Dōgen Zenji's, the translation. 37 up to 50 is the translation of Dōgen Zenji's writing. That is Dōgen Zenji's Gakudō Yōjinshū, Points to Watch in Buddhist Training. Those are all going to be taken up in each chapter yet again. So if you maybe don't have to read that if you don't want to now, or you can, but we will be taking it up at the beginning of each chapter. So if you go to page 59, where you see number 1, the need to awaken to the Bodhi mind, what is written in italics there is the chapter 1 by Dōgen Zenji. So we would be getting that at the beginning of each of the chapters. So if you don't want to read the whole thing through, that's okay too, because you would want to refresh yourself anyway when you came to read the chapter, it would seem to me. So I think that it's up to you whether you feel that you must read the entirety of it all at once. And that translation is 37 up to page 50. And then again, it's reprinted. The first chapter is reprinted in number 1 on page 59. And that is what we are going to take up next week, 50 from there. And I think that we should read the whole thing because it's only 5 pages. It's a fairly short one. Remember that these were spoken, these were delivered, these were talks that were delivered in speaking. And so it's a little bit different from sitting down writing something. So next week, then we would read from 59 up to 70. So just 11 pages, so fairly short. Whether we get through talking about the whole thing, I don't know, but let's just say that because I can't see a stopping place in the middle in chapter 1. I just don't see a place where you could stop and say, okay, we'll just take that section, even though we might in talking. So, does anybody have any other questions about the reading that we did?
Comment about that part where Dōgen Zenji says, if you are unable to find a true master, it is best not to study the Buddha Dharma at all. I was just wondering if he said that, you know, given within the context of his time, there might have been, I'm not remembering all my Japanese history, but I know there was a big period in Japan where there was a lot of corruption in the Buddhist temples.
This is true.
And so maybe it was really difficult to find anybody who was really practicing purely. Is it possible you think he said that given there was so much corruption in that time?
I mean, it's possible. I mean, he himself couldn't find an answer to his own koan, and so that's why he went off to China to see what he could find. If he could find a teacher in China who could help him settle his own koan. And so there was that. But I find that a difficult statement myself, Joan. And it's possible that it had to do with the corruption at that time, but at the same time, it's a hard one to handle. So
I didn't find it to be so hard, even for us today. You don't want to study, but you don't want to commit yourself to a teacher who's a fraud, and there are plenty of them out there.
Well, this is true, but when he says a true master, there is the sense that, oh, this person is so vastly realized that there'd only be one living at any given time. There is maybe a feeling like that, and so it's true. There are many frauds, but the other thing that I want to say then. If you come to a teacher and you feel, okay, I can study with that teacher and I can feel that I am receiving something that is true and authentic, then that's your true teacher in that sense. So that's the way you must go. And, we have various intuitions and ways of testing whether that is the teacher with whom we want to study. And then there is the point where perhaps we say, okay, now I need to go to some other teacher because I feel I need to further my study in some way. So that's also authentic to do. And we have, story after story of students who couldn't realize with the teacher, so they leave the temple and they wander off and they go to somebody else. And then maybe they wind up going back to their own teacher, their first teacher, to find out something. And I think that happens. And so we should say that if we find a teacher with whom we decide that we want to study, we want to be able to be part even of the Sangha. The Sangha is also part of the teacher. So it isn't just the teacher alone. It's the Sangha and the Buddha Dharma Sangha. It's the three parts to this that make up the totality of the teacher and the Sangha and the Buddha. So we put all those together and we say, okay, I can be there. I can do that, and I can work there, and that's the way I want to go. That's your true teacher, then. So.
Inoue-san, is it safe to say, he says in number 7, I'm struck by this about, he's comparing scholastic Buddhism to the, where they transmitted various Buddhist texts but forgotten the spirit of Buddhism.
Yes.
Is Zazen the spirit of Buddhism, where you become, you're practicing something, and am I asking the right question? Am I asking? So is it the spirit of Buddhism to practice Zazen? Can you say that, to practice Zazen?
Yes. Yeah, that is the spirit of Buddhism. Yeah, that is the spirit. And so, if we just go to book learning, if we only look in books and think that we've arrived somewhere, this is his critique then of what happens to certain people who just get stuck in a school study, a scholastic study. So,
well, then I would imagine if one aspires to enlightenment by the practice of that, and forgive me, but let me try to ask this. If one aspires to enlightenment through the practice of Zazen, and one is fortunate to have that enlightenment, in our humanity, it would seem difficult to forget that experience. And if you do, forget it, if you're able to forget it, I would think that would create some sort of suffering in itself, because then part of us are trying to reattain it, but we are to let it go, right?
Well, I think the suggestion in that is that we let it go because we have completely become it.
Okay.
And then we don't have to remember it all the time. We don't have to think on it, because we would just be it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, my friends, I see that it's time, and you're just so wonderful, all of you. The Dharma, everyone has such beautiful Dharma to express and to share. So I deeply appreciate your wisdom that comes out together. Very, very beautiful. So again, the next time we are taking up page 59 to 70. And I want to say that the weather forecast for Saturday looks very bad. So I think that we will be on Zoom, and I will we will send out a newsletter tomorrow morning to say that I'll look at the forecast. I'll wait until tomorrow morning, but I think that the forecast is not going to be for outside Zazen. So we will be on Zoom on Saturday morning, but I will send the newsletter. So be on the alert to receive the newsletter for the time, and it will be 8 to 9:30, so that we will have morning Zazen, morning ceremony, and then we'll gather around the screen a little bit and just a little check-in, a little social check-in to see how everybody is. And so I think that you'll get that tomorrow, because my feeling is that it's going to rain. It's going to rain. So, soon it's going to rain, and we'll let it. So, all right. Well, many, many thanks. Anybody else, anything else to say? Yeah, okay. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. See you Saturday morning. See you for Zazen.
Good night,
Saturday
everyone.
morning. Don't have to leave.